when we start treating each other as equals and seeing each other as like human beings and people that have power and people that can grow to be something great, that's when we can start to form up and team up as a community as a whole, and not just have these like smaller groups of people of race and things like that fighting for something.
What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are
This forum was created to give voice to those students on our OCC community who have joined the 500-year-old fight to live in a world where our lives matter. But we ask, are you listening? I'm Jade Lewis, and with me today are Quindell Williams, Karianne Dixon, Jabari Stansel, and Sam Prince, all graduates of OCC's now broadcast media department. Quindell, I think you're up next.
So I guess, another misguided justification is saying, I have Black friends, or, my best friend is Black, or, I work with Black people, how does that kind of narrative, I guess that statement, how does that dismiss you from, the conversation of overall racism?
A term that I found on the internet over the past couple of years, I think College Humor came out with a video titled Diet Racism. And it's just been one of my favorite ways to explain that narrative to people who just kind of don't get it. Because there's a few different ways to be racist without, thinking that you're racist. And so diet racism is defined as the drink of choice for those who the idea of white privilege is lost upon. People who don't realize what kind of white privilege they might have because they may have grew up in a home that had less than the average family. But it's the people that think, there's a BET channel, why isn't there like a white network kind of thing? People who think stop and frisk is okay and it's not, a narrative against Black people as well. People who have weird opinions on affirmative action, people who say no offense before they say kind of a really bad joke. And they make direct eye contact with someone who's of color in the room, people who make comments about Kool-Aid and cornbread and all sorts of other cultural ideas that we're supposed to believe in as African Americans. People who think they should be able to say the N-word in any context, whether it's a song, just really, really random topics that I guess you wouldn't expect or you wouldn't know unless you were taught that those would be okay. And there's some sort of narrative that, I have a Black friend, so I can't be racist. You have to look, is that person your friend as well? Like, does that friendship go both ways, or are they just a Black person that's in your life? Because that's also something I've noticed is you might think you're friends, but that person is not your friend. They're just someone filling a quota in your life.
Yeah, I also read something interesting about how a lot of Black people specifically right now are starting to realize that a lot of maybe the white friends that they grew up with aren't really their friends. It's just people, like they were never an ally to Black people. They were just someone who took you out of that traditional, stereotypical, whatever Black person narrative in America. So they took you out of that and they don't see you as that because they got to know you. That doesn't mean that they don't still uphold those really, really deep-rooted racist and systematic beliefs that are working towards oppressing you.
And I think also, a lot of people think racism is this, one dimensional thing. If I'm not wearing a white hood with a, pitchfork and, a tiki torch, that, there's no way I can be racist. And, it's deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than, what you envision racism to be. And I think people need to start recognizing that, and we go back to just being comfortable in situations where, you're able to thrive, and, people are, I think what we're seeing now is people starting to recognize their comfort level and being uncomfortable with that and starting to speak out about it. And just saying, I have a Black friend, or, to me, I feel that is a little more racist, it's like, okay, well, that does not discount what you're saying or how you feel overall about, Black Americans, just because you have that one friend that you can count on one hand of who you have. So, that might be a little more okay to me.
one black person, two black people, a black coworker cannot co-sign you for the entire race of black. Like, that is an absolutely insane concept. So I think that that's something that I think a lot of people need to understand, that just because you have one black person or X amount, whatever, in your life, that doesn't mean that they can then co-sign you for the rest of time with all black people ever, which is why I think it's so important with activism. We're all actively working on it all the time. It's a habit, not a trend. So it has to be something that, if you're an ally to black people, great, awesome. You constantly have to be someone who's willing to kind of show up and talk the talk. Like, you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk all the time, every day, not just with that one black person or X amount, whoever you know.
I would like to add on that. A lot of times when it comes to joking about black people or making a comment about it, it's pretty unnecessary at the moment. I have a lot of white friends in my life. I had a lot of black friends in my life, and I can pretty much see the difference. I have been on the end of black jokes from white people. And do I think it's funny? Yeah, I do sometimes, but I also think it's unnecessary. What's the point of you saying that? Because I know if I probably wasn't here, you probably would have never made that joke in the first place. So why are you saying it now? I just want to say, like, it's pretty unnecessary, guys. You don't have to make this joke around me. You can just treat me like any other person in your life. You don't have to treat me just because I'm black. Oh, I should probably make a black joke. He'll probably laugh at it. It's pretty unnecessary. I don't think you need to comment about certain topics or bring up certain topics around me. Like, you don't need to bring up Donald Trump around me. You don't need to bring up the wall. You don't need to bring up like a slavery topic or, what type of shoes I'm wearing. It's pretty unnecessary. I am the person who I am for a reason, and I love myself. You don't need to point it out to other people.
I think that goes back to them trying to get you to be the person, the one black person in their life who's going to co-sign them as funny or woke or whatever.
I think that it's really important where you guys are talking about activism, and I think activism is important, but our further strides will happen where our interpersonal relationships are, which I think is it's really critical when we have relationships with Caucasian people and we're close and we're friends, and they're like, oh, hey, you're that one black friend that I have, or I have two black friends, that those people who are actually their friends, that I know change is hard, but that we continue to approach people with gentleness and mercy, and that we continue to encourage the doorway to be open, to have conversations about what's kind of going on. Because I think that while activism is very important because it gets things out there on a broad scale, our influence will be multiplied if on the individual level or the interpersonal level, we're able to take those different relationships we have with Caucasian people and are able to have conversations with them regarding these things. And so I think that I love it when I hear, oh, I have this one black friend or I have this two black friends, because that means that the door is open for them to have more friends, right? But that the door is open for them to be able to have these interpersonal relationships where this immediate big change might be hard, but that we can begin to plant these different seeds, these different ideas into their head and slowly begin to change them. So I know it's a little frustrating because, we all want to see this change happen overnight, and I wish it could too. But in reality, the change is in creating relationships with these different people. And so, I have white friends who are starting to have kids, and we're real close, and we've had these conversations. And now, I'm gonna be like an uncle to their kids and be in their life. And so they're gonna grow up seeing me, and we're gonna have these different interactions so that when they're an adult, right, they're gonna see the world a little differently than their parents do. And in this way, we kind of take a step-by-step approach to kind of changing the world. And I think as each generation or as each new child grow up and we're more connected, we'll start to see change.
What essentially it is, just to kind of break it down and a little bit the sort of terms that we're more familiar with, it's microaggressions, right? So what we're talking about with all of those are all microaggressions of racism. And that's something that I think is in this kind of new wave of civil rights. That's a big targeting point for the movement, is understanding not only white privilege, but also these microaggressions. And like, if you're a white person, you're tending to not worry about those things that you just mentioned, Karianne. And so I think that that's kind of just to add to that, it's the microaggressions aspect is where that's a lot of that I think is coming from.
I mean, I don't have to worry about, you know, being afraid of a Black person when I'm in the elevator with them or near a store with them. I hold my purse tighter when anyone walks near me, because as a woman walking down the street, like, I'm afraid of just kind of men in general sometimes. That's just a fear I think I have just for anyone. It's not a color issue, but there are people who explicitly, whether it's a man or a woman, if someone of color gets in close quarters with them, they get a little nervous. And that's a thing. But they could also be that person that says, you know, I have a Black friend. That's something I'll see sometimes.
I think right now it's also important to know, I know we're going to get into this later, so I won't talk too much on it, but like you and I, Karianne, we also come from a place of privilege as being light-skinned women. And so those interactions are very, very different for anyone who is darker skin, as well as men in general of the Black community. I have a younger brother. He's 6'2", plays football, like he's huge, like 200 and a couple pounds. And he's got like an afro. So I might be able to pass as being like, in terms of these microaggressions, non-threatening, but he can't. So there's certain spaces that we enter into as lighter skin women in the Black community that aren't able to be occupied by others. And so that's what's important too, is understanding. I know we're going to get into colorism later, so I won't get too much, because that's I love that topic and I love talking about it because I don't think it's discussed enough. But you know, it's really important for us too, to understand that privilege, but also, as you said, as a woman, that's why all of these movements have to be intersectional, because at the end of the day, if it's not, you're treating a symptom. And the whole goal is to treat, you know, you want to treat the bigger problem, right? So we have to kind of acknowledge that we need to be including so many different kinds of people in these narratives and being aware of how they're experienced differently. I'd love to hear from Quindell, Sam, or Jabari on this as well.
What we're seeing a lot now with the use of the camera phone is that, you know, people who are, you know, Black people in particular, having the cops called on them for doing regular everyday things, you know, jogging in the park, or, you know, having a picnic in the park, or a bird watching, or, you know, things that, you know, people enjoy to do that's not really a threatening thing. You know, Black people are getting the cops called on them. And, you know, those microaggressions are as exhausting as the other, you know, things that happen to Black people. You know, when we see videos of people getting killed on social media, that, you know, that's mentally draining. That's, you know, mentally exhausting. But, you know, you add that on top of just, you can't do everyday things without someone feeling threatened or a particular way about how you're doing that, you know, that's draining as well. And so, yeah, you know, whether, you know, you call it diet racism or whatever you want to call it, it's you know, just being Black in America is emotionally draining. And I don't think people understand that. And you can put video after video and scream as loud as you can to kind of get people to try to see that. But if they don't, you know, experience that, then they just, you know, some people just don't get it. And so they move on with their lives. And I think what we're seeing, excuse me, I think what we're seeing now is that people are forced to look at it now because, you know, we're all in quarantine or we're at home and you can't be at work. There's very little distractions right now. And so now it's really hitting you in the face like, okay, wait a minute, what? Yeah, I heard about this, but yeah, this is really happening. And so I think that's why, you know, you see people really energized now to do more in terms of, you know, people who are not Black really energized to do more and change that narrative.
And I think what you say there, Wendell, is really good. And when you think about it in the aspect of kind of being in Hawaii, it's a little bit different down here, whereas everybody kind of has brown skin. And so it's kind of flipped on its head. So when you say that, you know, people don't really experience, right, that kind of diet racism or that non-overt racism, it's kind of flipped on its head down here in Hawaii. And so I'm down here with a few of my Caucasian friends, and we've had different conversations because in that kind of way, in the Hawaiian society, they now don't necessarily feel a part of it. And they're like, man, it seems a little racist down here, a little different. Why don't I get along as well with some different Hawaiian people down here, right? When you have so many different people who have brown skin and a few of them who are white. And I said, wow, it's interesting because this opens the door for us to have a conversation about how people feel. We call the rest of the upper states, we call that the mainland, right? And I said, it gives us a conversation, it gives us the open door to have a conversation about how African Americans feel on the mainland. Because when you come down here, when you come to other places, you call these people racist. And I'm like, yeah, it might not be right the way that they're treating you. And that doesn't feel good, right? But that's the same way in a sense that we feel on the mainland back in America when, right, somebody clutches their purse, or, you know, you're followed in a store, or you're treated differently. And I'm like, it's not these overt things that you're thinking about. It's these small little things that kind of make you know that you're not a part of us, that we all aren't together. And I'm like, you experience that here and you're vocalizing it now. And I just want you to take that experience that you're kind of having here in Hawaii, whether you choose to stay or not, because a lot of people choose to move back to the mainland or the upper states because of that. But whether you choose to stay or not, I want you to take that experience that you're feeling where you're in a situation where you're not the majority. And I want you to, when you look at these different situations, to see that this is how everybody else is feeling. So down here, it's kind of flipped on its head in that way. Once you get away from places that aren't majority white, and that the politicians are majority white, and now people have to begin to look at things in a different way when they start to feel that kind of dire racism. And to that point, I would say that I don't want the idea of racism to just be that, you know, it's a white on black thing, because it's every culture, right? A lot of different cultures have these little diet or small little microaggressions that they do towards one another. And so by highlighting one, you know, I think that it's also pertinent to know that some of the inner and deeper responses that we might have within ourselves to have those microaggressions too, like, oh, you know, I can't mess with a white person, or different things that you know we might be dealing with also. So I think it works both ways.
This is something that's so impactful to everybody around us, not just the black community, but the white community, because if we're not all in one, nobody's going to be comfortable. Nobody's going to be comfortable. We can't sit back and watch. Nobody is separate from this issue. So emotional, because I know this is a time for change for our people.
What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side?